My name is Ethan. I'm a seasonal park ranger in Yellowstone National Park. The kind of outpost gig where the horizon isn't a line. It's a scar, jagged and steamin', cutting across the caldera like the earth itself got tired of holding its secrets. If you've ever flipped through those glossy visitor guides, the ones with bison silhouetted against golden sunsets and geysers erupting like nature's applause, you might romanticize it. A noble watch over America's first wilderness, badge gleaming under endless skies, coffee steaming in the crisp mountain air. That's the postcard version. The reality? It's closer to babysitting a volcano that's forgotten it's supposed to be dormant. The ground under your boots doesn't just support you. It probes, shifts, exhales sulfur that clings to your skin like a fever dream you can't shake. Out here in the backcountry, my beat is the hidden veins, the geothermal basins where the crust thins to eggshell fragility. Boardwalks snaking over vents that bubble and belch like overfed beasts. Mornings start before the tourists stir. Dawn patrols when the fog rolls in thick as regret, muffling the world to whispers and wet slaps of boot on wood. The air hits you first. That unmistakable rotten egg tang of hydrogen sulfide, sharp enough to etch your sinuses, mixing with the damp pine rot from the lodgepole stands that lean precarious over the fissures. You taste it on your tongue, feel it settle in your lungs, like ash from a fire you didn't light. And the sounds, God, the sounds. Not the roar of Old Faithful's clockwork fury, but the subtler ones. The low gurgle from a mud pot, like a throat-clearing phlegm. The crackle of mineral crust giving way under a misplaced step, echoing hollow as a drum in an empty chest. My outpost is a relic, a squat cabin pieced from reclaimed timber, perched on a ridge overlooking the Firehole River's sulfur-choked bends. Government-funded, sure, but it's the kind of funded that means peel and paint and a roof that leaks in patterns matching the seismic charts. Inside, it's one long room divided by sagging bunks and a potbelly stove that wheezes more smoke than heat. The air hangs perpetual with the percolator's bitter brew, coffee scorched black as basalt, percolating 24/7 on a hot plate that's seen better decades. We've got power, barely. Flickering bulbs strung on frayed cords, fed by a generator that coughs diesel like a chain smoker's hack, drowning out the night's symphony of vent hisses. The front porch is my throne, a warped deck with a single rocking chair that creaks like old knees, facing the caldera where steam plumes rise lazy in the valleys below. From here, on clear days, you can trace the fault lines. Orange glows seeping from cracks, bison herds dotting the meadows like punctuation marks in a sentence too long to finish. But clear days are liars. Most mornings the fog blankets everything, turning the park into a watercolor smear. Trees dissolving at the edges, paths vanishing into white that feels alive, probing with invisible fingers. I sit there with the radio clipped to my vest, its antenna bent from too many brushes with low branches, scanning frequencies that mostly spit static laced with distant chatter.
Unit 7, thermal spike at Norris. Confirm?
Or the eerie silences, broken only by the occasional mule train rumble bringing supplies from the valley floor. Supplies, that's another layer. No Amazon drone drops out here. A grizzled hauler named Thomas pilots the mule string up the fire roads when the snow melts or the rains ease. Crates of MREs, jerky packs, and those preserve-issue salt canisters that weigh like lead and smell faintly of ozone. He never lingers, unloads in the drizzle, eyes on the horizon like he's allergic to questions, then vanishes back down the grade with a nod that says more than words. Keep it buried, Ranger. The corkboard inside the cabin? That's our war room, a chaos of tacks and faded topo maps, yarn strung in colors code. Red for active vents, black for incidents that don't make the Ranger logs, blue for the migrations we pretend aren't happening. Patterns emerge if you stare long enough. Lines converging on the hot spots, like veins feeding a hidden heart. Technically, I'm not supposed to be here. Not with my history, anyway. Back in the lowlands, before the mountains claimed me, my life read like a dime store warning. 5 years slated for a string of break-ins. Nothing flashy. No capers with masks or getaway cars. Just nights blurring into desperation. A crew of ghosts with sticky fingers and stickier regrets, prying open what wasn't ours to touch. No guns, no blood on the floor, just echoes in empty houses and a judge's gavel cracking like thunder over a plea deal gone sour. He called me salvageable. Leaned forward in that oak-paneled courtroom, with eyes like he'd seen too many repeats, and said, "Use the stretch to rebuild, son. Figure out who you want to be when the bars come down." Prison was the great equalizer, fluorescent hum drilling into your skull, concrete that chilled through thin mattresses, days measured in chow lines and yard laps, where the sun felt like a stranger peeking through bars. But time in a cell isn't redemption, it's fermentation, slow and sour, turning bad choices into something you can't spit out. That's when the preserve knocked. Not a knock, really, a shadow in the interview room, a suit without a name, sliding a folder across the scarred table. Alternative placement, it said, voice flat as a seismic readout. Red zones need eyes, you need out. No sales pitch, no promises of glory, just the math. 5 years vertical versus horizontal in the heat haze, trading orange for olive drab. I signed, figuring it was a lateral slide, guarding gates instead of pacing cells. But Yellowstone, it's a different cage, one with teeth. Elena's the one who broke me in. My field lead, she's a fixture here. 50s, etched deep around eyes that have mapped more fissures than most geologists dream of. Limp from a boardwalk buckle back in '89. Her hip clicks like a metronome set to dirge. But she moves through the steam like it's her living room. Voice like she'd gargled with lava rock, rough and unyielding, but laced with a dry wit that sneaks up on you. "Ethan, if the vents burp and you taste regret, that's just Tuesday." She's the keeper of the manual, that dog-eared tome of leather and ink, pages warped from steam exposure, sketches of shapes that defy biology. Handed it to me on day 1 over mugs of her sludge. Read between the eruptions, kid, or let 'em read you. We clash on the small stuff. Her Morse code purism versus my app fiddles, debates over whether the mule hauler's special blend coffee beats the percolator's spite. But she's solid, calls me Rook without the bite, shares shifts where the fog presses close, and the only light is the glow from a fresh crack. Elena knows the preserve's underbelly, the way it started as Ranger whispers in the '70s, seismic oddities blamed on the supervolcano's tantrums, until the disappearances stacked like cordwood. Now it's a machine. Silent divisions tagging anomalies, containment crews rolling in under moonless skies. Our slice, the watch. Log the whispers, string the yarn, enforce the rules. Not the tourist traps, stay on path, don't feed wildlife, but the strange ones, the buried codes that keep the park from unraveling at the seams, hiding the real Yellowstone, the one where the steam carries voices, the ground hungers for more than rain, and monsters aren't metaphors. Those rules, they're the thread holding it. Whispers from the manual, etched in margins by hands long gone. Tourists flood the gates for the spectacle, the plumes, the pools, the illusion of tamed wild. We nod, wave them through, and pray they don't whistle into the wrong vent. Because out here, survival isn't about maps or merit badges. It's about knowing what the earth doesn't want you to hear. And if you listen too close, well, that's why I started this log, to pin the haze before it swallows me whole. My name is Ethan, Shadow Ranger, in the steaming heart. These are the strange rules, the ones they bury under the brochures, and the stories that clawed their way out. The preserve isn't some shiny federal agency with acronyms and press briefings. No, it's more like the shadow cast by the caldera itself. A quiet machinery built from necessity and buried under layers of plausible deniability. It didn't burst onto the scene with fanfare. It seeped in, starting as scribbled notes in ranger journals back in the late 60s, when the first seismic anomalies started spiking like fever in a patient nobody could diagnose. Folks chalked it up to the supervolcano's whims, the Yellowstone hotspot, that ancient plume of magma flexing under the crust, stirring pots nobody wanted to peek into. But then the patterns emerged. Geysers cycling erratic, not by minutes, but hours off script. Mud pots burping up relics that weren't rock or bone, but something in between. Hikers vanishing not to cliffs or rivers, but to places the maps refused to acknowledge. By the 70s, it had a name, The Preserve, and a skeleton crew of consultants pulling double shifts in unmarked trailers, cross-referencing seismic data with folklore that sounded too much like field reports. No public face, no congressional oversight, just black budget strings from agencies that don't list their addresses. Their mandate? Track the anomalies. Those bleed-throughs from the geothermal underbelly. Steam wraiths, vapor entities that congeal from agitated vents, drifting like ghosts with tendrils that chill deeper than frostbite. Bone crawlers, fossil remnants animated by mineral pulses, slithering up from petrified beds with joints that click like dice in a grave. And worse, the deep ones, the laughers and glow eaters that the manuals only sketch in warning red. Climate's the accelerant now. Warmer vents from shifting plates, drier meadows stressing the herds. It's pushing migrations we never saw pre-millennium. Wraiths blooming earlier in the spring. Crawlers venturing north toward the tourist loops instead of hunkering in the basins. The preserve logs it all, divisions for seismic modeling, behavioral tagging, the rare containment protocols that involve crews in sealed suits and probes that hum frequencies to lure the things back down. But that's the inner circle. Us rangers, we're the first eyes, the perimeter watch, boots on the crust before the static clears. Spot the signs. A plume lingering too long, tracks that steam in the rain. Tag if you can. clip a tracker to a wraith's core before it fades, or mark a crawler's path with isotopic dust for the scanners. Then radio it cold, voice steady over the hiss. Anomaly at coordinates 44.4 north, bone signature confirmed. Request hunter vector. Hunters. That's the word Elena uses, low and wry, like she's naming ghosts she owes favors to. They roll in from the periphery, vans with plates from nowhere, teams of 5 or 6 in gear that gleams wrong under the sodium lamps. No chit-chat, no debriefs over coffee. They trank the big ones, net the swarmers, haul 'em back to labs buried deeper than the fissures. Us? We clean the yarn board after, string in fresh lines to chart the next drift. It's containment by proxy, prevention wrapped in protocol. Because if the anomalies breach the boardwalks en masse, well, the brochures wouldn't cover that evacuation. Elena's the bridge to all that, the living manual, if manuals walked with a limp, and a flask of something herbal that cuts the sulfur sting. She's been woven into this since the 80s, back when the preserve was still Project Caldera and memos arrived by hand courier on horseback. That hip? She calls it a hot spring handshake. A misstep during a bloom in 87, and then when a vent decided to vent personal. Steam caught her leg mid-stride, scalding shallow but searing deep, leaving her with a gait that echoes the Earth's own stutter. Doesn't slow her, though. If anything, it tunes her. She feels the tremors before the sensors ping, hip clicking like a built-in seismograph. She's the one who mapped my crash course. First week. Fog so thick you could carve it. Her handing me the field binder over a camp stove, sputtering in the porch gloom. Elena's been here since the 80s. Limp from a hot spring mishap, I scribbled later, the words blurring like my notes. She knows the rules like her own scars, tattooed in margins of the manual, passed down from the old guard who vanished in the 90s spikes. Ethan, she says, voice scraping like boot on center. Tourists break 'em every season. That's why we have the yarn board. Red string for violations. Black for the ones that don't come back. Her laugh then, dry as bone dust. And the coffee? Black as the voids, kid. Cuts the sulfur breath better than your city sludge. We spar over it still. Her percolator spite versus my valley ground beans. Arguments flaring like a minor plume while the radio chatters ghosts. Sulfur breath's a ranger's perfume. She'll grunt, pour in a mug that could strip varnish. Your fancy roast? That's for sipping with the anomalies, not surviving 'em. But beneath the barbs, she's the anchor, mentor in the making, teaching me to read the yarn like tea leaves, the static like whispers. Elena doesn't just know the preserve, she is it, a thread in the web holding the caldera from unraveling. The rules, though, they're the real inheritance. Not etched in stone, but in the steam-scarred pages, a half-dozen core tenets that start simple and twist inward, breeding paranoia like mold in damp boots. Elena recites them like bedtime threats, each laced with an anecdote that sticks worse than the smell. They're not arbitrary, they're the park's hidden pulse. Codes to keep the heart buried, the anomalies at bay. Break one, and you're not just off script. You're bait. Here's the litany, the ones that saved my skin more times than the badge. Rule 1. Never whistle near the geysers. Sounds like playground nonsense, a holdover from campfire yarns to hush the kids. But the vents amplify funny out here. Sound waves bouncing down the throats, stirring pressures that rise too soon. Rule 1. Whistling, Elena drilled over a patrol where the air hung leaden. Sounds stupid, but I saw a tourist do it once. Geyser erupted 10 minutes early, steam thick as grief. What came out? Wasn't vapor. It lingered, shaped like hands reaching. That bloom? Pulled a shuttle van off the apron, driver swearing he felt fingers on the wheel. Whistles call the wraiths early. Why the rule? To keep the steam innocent, the plumes just water and wonder, not harbingers from below. Rule 2. If the bison circle a tree line, don't approach. They're herding something away from you. Tourists gawk at the herds like living art, but those brutes sense the undercurrents, the vibrations of crawlers rising, bone against root. Elena's tale, a 95 circle near Lamar, rangers ignoring the ring, finding a femur polished clean inside. Bison don't guard grass, they guard the living from the unearthed. The rule hides the migrations, keeps the meadows myth, not graveyard. Rule 3. Flashlights off after dusk in the back country. Lights attract the glow eaters. Beams pierce wrong in the dark, feeding voids that swell and swallow. One click too long, Elena warns, and your light's the last thing you see. Her partner in 03 vanished mid-sweep. Lantern core found fused cold. Lights invite hunger. The rule starves it, preserving night as ally, not abyss. And the rest? Count your steps on boardwalks, even to anchor against shifts. No photos of petrified trees at dawn, lest shadows stalk your gallery. Laughter from vents? Plug and retreat backward, denying the lure. Each a suture on the park's skin, hiding the heart that beats geothermal and greedy. I learned the rules the hard way. Like every rookie who thinks a badge makes you bulletproof, or steam-proof in this case. My first real taste came barely a week in during what should have been a milk run. Joint patrol with Elena along the upper Geyser Basin. That stretch of boardwalks encircling Old Faithful like a necklace on a giant's neck. Summer swell was in full throttle. Tourists pouring from the shuttles like ants to a picnic. Families in khaki shorts and floppy hats. Kids clutching stuffed bison that looked more ferocious than the real ones. The air that morning hung thick, a prelude to the heat wave that would choke the valleys for days. Sulfur heavy as wet wool, mingling with the sunscreen and sweat bouquet of the crowds. The ground beneath the planks, vibrating faint, like a distant train rumbling through the earth's veins. Elena and I were posted at the overflow viewing platform, her leaning on the rail with that casual vigilance she'd perfected, hip cocked against the ache, eyes scanning the throng like a hawk, picking over a meadow. We'd just finished the morning brief, reroute the stragglers from the fire roads, remind the photo hounds about the no-off trail signs that nobody reads. She handed me a thermos of her sulfur special, coffee laced with ginger to cut the bite, and grunted, "Keep 'em herded, Ethan. Faithful's finicky today. Sensors pinged a microcycle last night." I nodded, vest still stiff with newness, radio clipped high on my shoulder like it might bite back. The crowd milled oblivious, voices overlapping in a babel of accents. German families posing with thermoses raised like trophies. A cluster of retirees debating the plume's exact height, and there, edged near the basin's lip, a gaggle of college kids, backpacks slung low, one of them breaking into a jaunty whistle. It started innocent, that sharp, lilting tune, the kind you pick up from old movies or road trip radios, piercing the steam like a thrown stone into still water. The Whistler, a lanky guy in a faded band tee, grinning as his buddies egged him on, oblivious to the ripple. Elena stiffened beside me, her mug pausing mid-sip, the porcelain clinking soft against her teeth. "Ethan," she muttered, voice low as the gathering rumble from below. "Ear on that one? Rule 1's no joke in bloom season." I glanced over. Rule 1 fresh in my binder, inked bold. Never whistle near the geysers. It calls the steam up early, and what rises isn't just water. Sounded like folklore fluff, the sort Elena spun to haze the new blood. But her eyes weren't joking. They tracked the sound, following its bounce off the sinter cones, down into the vents where the earth swallowed it whole. The whistle carried, amplified by the basin's acoustics, bouncing, twisting, threading into the fissures like a hook snagged on something deep and waiting. The crowd didn't notice at first, too busy with their countdowns. 5 minutes to showtime. But the cycle clock in my head ticked wrong. Old Faithful doesn't rush. She's a metronome, predictable as the tides. Yet there it was, a low groan from the conduit. Not the usual prelude sigh, but a guttural pull, like lungs inflating too fast. The ground trembled subtle under the boardwalk, planks flexing with a creak that set my teeth on edge. Elena's hand shot to her radio. "Base, this is Echo Lima, anomaly at Faithful Overlook. Auditory trigger, possible early plume." Static crackled back, clipped and urgent. "Copy Echo Lima, evac stragglers, hunter vector en route, ETA 20. Too late for clean. The geyser answered the call with a vengeance, erupting not in graceful arc but a chaotic blast, steam rocketing skyward 20 minutes premature, white hot and furious, laced with flecks of superheated mineral that hissed as they met the air. The crowd gasped, a mix of awe and alarm, phones thrusting higher like offerings. But Elena was already moving, her limp a mere hitch as she barked directions. "Back it up, folks. Clear the rim. Safety first." I fell in, waving the edges, the sulfur cloud rolling over us like a breaker, stinging eyes and coating throats in acrid film. But in the settling mist, as the plume peaked and began its languid fall, shapes emerged, not random wisps, but forms, coalescing slow, deliberate, tall silhouettes, humanoid in stretch but ethereal, tendrils curling from vague cores, where faces smeared like thumbed charcoal, steam wraiths, the manual's nightmare page, vapor aggregates, auditory summoned, chill contact, mnemonic bleed, whispers of the herd. They drifted on the downdraft, 3 or 4 strong, hovering at the basin's lip like sentinels roused from slumber. The tourists scattered in pockets, moms clutching kids, the whistler paling as his tune's echo died. But one wraith lingered, its form stabilizing nearer the boardwalk's end, tendrils questing like smoke from a dying fire. Elena held the line, salt shaker from her pack already in hand. The preserve blend, coarse grains etched with containment sigils, but protocol pinged. Observe, do not engage solo. My gut twisted. The wraith's drift carried it toward a straggler, an older woman frozen mid-retreat, her cough ragged in the haze. Without thinking, rookie fire, I flicked my flashlight on, beam cutting the steam like a scalpel, Rule 3 be damned. Flashlights off after dusk in the backcountry. Lights attract the glow eaters. Dawn or not, the logic held. Light fed the voids, and wraiths. They hungered for clarity, for the shapes sound gave them. The beam hit true, illuminating the wraith's core, a vortex of condensing vapor, flecked with iridescent minerals that caught the light like shattered glass. It recoiled at first, tendrils flaring, but then stabilized. The glow drew it, amplified the summon, its form sharpening, elongated limbs uncoiling, a face resolving in smears, mouth a vent, eyes hollows that pulled, and then the whisper, faint at first, threading through the steam's hiss, but clear as a cell block taunt. Ethan. My name dragged from the past, low, mocking, laced with the judge's drawl, the clang of iron bars I'd traded for this vest. It knew, pulled from the whistle's echo or deeper. The air turned frigid in the heat, my skin prickling as if doused in liquid nitrogen, burns blooming cold, red welts rising like accusations, the smell hitting next, not sulfur clean, but charred meat, faint and nauseating like flesh seared slow over an open flame nobody tended. Panic clawed up my throat, the beam trembling in my grip as the wraith advanced, tendrils brushing the boardwalk's edge with a sizzle like water on hot iron. Elena's voice cracked the static. Ethan, light off, now. You're painting a target. But the straggler stumbled back, into the wraith's reach, her gasp cutting short as a tendril grazed her arm, skin blanching instant, frostbite in the boil. The whisper swelled, layering my sins. Break, enter, rebuild. Echoes from the courtroom, twisted gleeful, the cold sinking bone deep, my fingers numbing around the flashlight, the world narrowing to that vortex face pulling me forward like a riptide in fog. Elena breached then, salt arcing from her shaker in a wide fan, grains hitting the steam with pops like embers quenched, the wraith fraying at the edges, its form destabilizing into harmless plume. I killed the light, plunging us back to the basin's glow, and lunged for the woman, hauling her clear as the hunter van screeched up the service road, teams spilling out in sealed gear, probes humming to disperse the remnants. The wraiths faded by mid-plume, the cycle resetting to normalcy. But the welts lingered, mine itching phantom, hers treated with preserve salve that smelled of pine and ozone, sloughing the chill but not the shake. Radio debrief that night, Elena's tone clipped over static. Rookie breach on 3, but containment held. Log it, Ethan. Wraith mnemonic confirmed. I did, back at the cabin, pencil scratching the manual's margin. Auditory summon via whistle. Light amplification noted. Personal echo. Past bleed. Salt dispersal. Effective at 5 meters. She didn't ream me, just slid a fresh mug across the table, her tea this time, steam curling innocent. Rules aren't suggestions, Ethan, she said, tracing a red yarn on the board. They're the only map out when the steam starts talking. I nodded, the welts throbbing like fresh ink, the whisper's aftertaste lingering. Charred echoes of who I was, rising unbidden. That night, sleep came fitful. The percolator's drip, mocking a distant whistle. The park didn't forget. It just waited for your next note. A month ground by after the wraiths, the heat wave breaking into storms that lashed the caldera like it owed the sky money. Rain hammered relentless, turning the fire roads to slurry rivers. Sensors lighting the shack's console with micro tremors. The kind the preserve tags pre-bloom, harbingers of vents flexing too hard. Elena pulled the petrified forest loop that night. That eerie stretch of ancient logs turned stone, standing sentinel in the Lamar Valley meadows like the skeletons of giants, felled mid-stride. Me? I drew solo perimeter on the valley flanks, radio tuned low, thermos nursing cold dregs of her ginger brew against the damp chill seeping through my vest. It was pushing midnight when the call crackled in. Static-laced urgency from dispatch. Unit Echo Tango. Missing hiker. Male, mid-30s. Last pinged off-trail near the petrified grove. Family on site. Wife's hysterical. Vanishings weren't rare out here. Twisted ankles in the talus, wrong forks in the fog. But this pinged off. The report layered in bison activity. A herd of 40-odd circling tight around the grove's edge, lowing deep and rhythmic, horns casting jagged shadows in the search party's hasty beams. Elena's voice sliced the interference before I could key. Ethan, vector to Lamar. Bison circle. Rule 2, hard. Observe from ridge, no approach. Her tone carried the weight. Rule 2 burned fresh. If bison circle a tree line, don't approach. They're herding something away from you. But the wife's plea looped in my earpiece, breaking over sobs. He was just looking at the rocks. Said they looked alive. Please. Gut overrode protocol. Rookie again. Or maybe the welts still itching from Faithful's whisper. I shouldered the pack, flare kit rattling like loose teeth, and humped it down the grade through the deluge. Rain sheeted sideways, turning the path to a greased slide, mud sucking at my boots with wet smacks that echoed too loud in the downpour. Lightning forked the sky intermittent, illuminating the valley in strobes. Meadows churned to chocolate mire. Lodgepole fringes bowing under the gale, and there, the herd. Massive forms, pressed shoulder to shoulder in a living ring, wool matted black with rain, breath pluming white in unison like a chorus exhaling dread. No frenzy, no blind charge. This was deliberate, ancient. A wall of flesh against the unseen, their low rumble vibrating through the soil up my legs, setting my teeth buzzing. I killed the light per habit. Navigating the fringe by the herd's thunder, the air thick with wet wool and something fouler. Decay undercut, like marrow exposed to air. Circling wide to the ridge overlook, Elena's yarn rules gnawed. Bison weren't pets or photo ops. They sensed the vibrations, the bone-deep tremors that roused what slept in the stone. The manual's entry on crawlers flickered in my mind. Subterranean relics, geothermal pulse animated. Emerge post-quake. Hunt by seismic echo. Solitary but voracious. Leave polished remnants. Elena's anecdotes haunted. A 95 circle in these same meadows. Rangers breaching the ring. Unearthing a femur arranged deliberate. Like kindling for a fire nobody lit. Dispatch-fed cords piecemeal. Hiker's GPS last at the grove's heart. Signal dead abrupt. The wife's voice looped. He texted the trees are moving, then nothing. I edged closer despite the rule, boot by boot, rain masking my slop, until the circle's gap yawned. A cleft in the bison press where petrified logs twisted unnatural, roots splayed like grasping fingers, bark long fossilized to unyielding gray. And in the tangle, tracks, not boot or paw, but drags, elongated furrows, spaced irregular, steaming faint in the chill, as if the rain boiled on contact. Something heavy, jointed wrong, had pulled itself from the underbed. Bone crawler, roused by the storm's quake, scenting vibration like blood in water. The hiker was there, wedged in the root snare, jacket shredded on thorns that looked too sharp, too recently stone. He stirred as thunder cracked overhead, eyes fluttering, mud-caked face murmuring, it dragged me. From the roots, whispering crunch. His leg lay twisted, gash weeping dark in the flash, bone glinting white through the flap like an accusation. The air turned cloying then, rot, undercut with ozone, the ground sucking wet around us. I keyed the radio, thumb slipping on the wet fob. Echo Lima, visual on hiker, Lamar Grove, severe, circle holding, but... Static swallowed Elena's reply, but her voice punched through. Rule 2, Ethan, back off. Breach that, and you're the next drag. Too late. The vibration swelled. A low scrape from the shadows beyond the ring, like dry bones grinding on gravel, building to a click-click rhythm that set my spine to water. The bison stamped harder, hooves churning divots, a thunder wall fraying at the edges as the thing tested. It emerged deliberate. 8 feet of articulated horror, uncoiling from the petrified fringe, spine arched, scimitar curved, limbs pallid as chalk under the lightning, jointed in multiples that bent backward and in, tipped with hooks that clicked rain slick. Skull a hollowed log, vents for eyes exhaling mist that burned the nostrils, charred wood and marrow, the smell of ancient meat unearthed. Bone crawler, manual incarnate, hunts slow, breaks before bites. Tracks by echo avoid seismic noise. It lunged, not charge, but surge, hooks raking a log splinter in spray, the hiker yelping as roots snagged tighter. Rule 2 shattered in my chest. I breached the circle, even steps forgotten in the slop, flare unholstered but unlit, salt shaker fumbling from the pack. The herd parted reluctant, a gap like grudging mercy, hooves sliding in the mire as I hauled the guy free, his weight dead as sodden timber. Gasps ragged against my shoulder. Run, it knows the ground, he wheezed, but the crawler pursued. Slow, inexorable, crashing through saplings with snaps like vertebrae parting, hooks carving furrows that steamed and smoked. Rain did nothing to dull it. If anything, the wet amplified the clicks, echoing off the petrified stands like a dirge in stone. We bolted or staggered, me dragging him, mud betraying every stride, lightning painting our flight in stark white. The swang thickened, coiling from the crawler's vents like breath from a grave, the air turning fetid with that marrow rot, clinging to my tongue like oil. Elena's radio pierced the gale. Ethan status, flare it if you must, and don't trip on your redemption, kid. We've got enough ghosts. Her humor, gravel dry over static, yanked a grim huff from me. Redemption, yeah, the convict's badge I'd pinned on this mess. But the chase dragged eternal. Crawler gaining inch by inexorable inch. Hooks whispering through brush inches from my heel, the ground seeming to tilt toward it. Roots rising like snares. The hiker's phone buzzed faint in his pocket, flash-popping accidental beam catching the crawler's flank in a glare that made it shriek silent, vents flaring wide. Rule 5 hit then, desperate. No photos of petrified trees at dawn, the shadows move in the film. But night or not, the logic twisted. Light-etched trails, shadows clung. Phone, delete it, I snarled, snatching the device mid-stride, thumb smashing the gallery, shots of the grove, logs moving in blur, shadows elongated wrong. Deleting them felt like erasing footprints. The crawler's shriek peaked, form stuttering as if the light's echo frayed its pull, hooks raking air where my back had been. We broke the circle's rim, bison closing thunderous behind, their mass a barrier the thing couldn't breach clean. Hooks scraping wool, eliciting bellows that shook the valley. The trailhead loomed in the next flash. Elena there, rifle slung low across the hood of the service truck. headlights cutting the rain like knives. She waved us in, salt line hasty across the gravel, the crawler halting at the edge, vents huffing, joints clicking retreat, melting back to the grove's shadows like mist to stone. Evac chopper thup-thupped in minutes. Preserve medics swarming the hiker. Compound fracture set. Blood transfused. But his eyes haunted. The crunch. Like teeth on bone. No tag that night. The crawler escaped to the underbed, but the yarn board webbed anew. Black string looping Lamar. Red for the breach. Blue for the migration hint. Crawlers pushing Valley Ward, storm-woken and hungry. Elena debriefed over the truck's dash. Rain drumming tin. Close one, Rook. Circles a wall for a reason. Bison heard the unearthed. Keep the stones sleeping. I logged it meticulous. Crawler emergence post-microquake. Bison deterrent partial. Photo delete disrupted track. Rule 5 variant. Hiker recovery. Full, but echo trauma noted. Her clap on my shoulder was solid, no limp in the grip. You pulled him. That's the job, Ethan. Not clean, but done. Pizza from the emergency drop later. Extra pepperoni, her hoard shared without grudge. The steam from the box curling innocent, but sleep evaded. The clicks replaying in the rain's patter. The escape gnawing. One crawler loose meant more stirring. Migrations bleeding from the fissures. The park's heart quickening under the crust. That breach lingered like the mud in my boots. Rule 2 a scar now, teaching that hurting wasn't just bison instinct. It was the Earth's, pushing the buried back where it belonged. Elena's quip over the radio replayed. Don't trip on your redemption. Funny in the dark, me, the ex-con chasing ghosts in the wild, learning the hard way that some walls you don't breach. You build them higher. By late summer, the migrations thickened the air like unseen fog. Memos stacking in the radio queue. Warnings of elevated crossover activity from the deep basins. Anomalies drifting north with the warmer vents. Elena and I traded shifts in a haze of sweat and sulfur. The corkboard's yarn webbing denser. Red lines bleeding into black like ink in water. The rules weren't isolated anymore. They wove, one breach echoing the next, turning patrols into chess with the caldera as board. Geologic shifts. Microquakes rippling under the crust. Stirred it all, pushing the buried upward. The steam carrying hungers that didn't dissipate with the heat. That's when the laughter hit, turning the Norris Geyser Basin into a carnival nobody survived. Peak season choked the loops. RVs bumper to bumper at the gates. Tour buses disgorging hordes in pastel polos and sensible shoes, all chasing the must-sees, with apps beeping like frantic heartbeats. Norris was a hotspot. Steamboats' erratic roars drawing the brave, the porcelain basin's rainbow pools, luring the selfie set. Elena and I drew the midday sweep, her thermos swinging from her belt like a talisman. My vest chafing under the relentless sun that baked the crust to brittle. We'd just cleared a knot of Europeans from the off-limits rim. Smiles and nods. Ja, we stay on path. When it started. Faint at first. Bubbling from the vents like overboiled kettle. A giggle threading the steam. Not kids. The nearest group was teens snapping pics 50 yards off. But it persisted. Manic, inviting. Rolling off the center terraces in waves that set the hairs on my neck pricking. Rule 6 flickered urgent. If you hear laughter from the vents, plug your ears and walk backward. Elena froze mid-step, her hip clicking sharp as she scanned the basin. Laughers, she muttered, voice pitched low under the crowd's din. Early for Norris, Quake must have cracked a pocket. The manual sketch haunted. Auditory mimics, geothermal echo traps. Bait with familiarity, lure to fishers. Non-corporeal, deny engagement. They weren't monsters of fang or claw. Worse, echoes from the depths. Gas pockets twisting trapped sounds into lures, pulling you close enough for the drop. Elena's lore. A Zotu bloom that mimicked a tour guide's joke, swallowing 6 before the hunters sealed the vent with seismic plugs. The laughter swelled, infectious, now laced with voices, snippets from the crowd. A woman's trill from the bus group. Oh, look at the colors. Twisted, gleeful, elongated into hysteria. A kid's snort morphed to guffaw, echoing off the cones like a party in hell. Tourists paused, heads tilting, smiles cracking uncertain. A cluster of 5. Couple, 2 friends, a lone backpacker, edging closer to the source. A fresh fisher near the whirligig. Sounds like people down there? The mimicry sharpened, baiting. Their own chuckles rebounding, drawing them step by step toward the rim where the crust thinned to treacherous. Elena radioed base. Echo Lima, laughter bloom at Norris, tourist vector, Rule 6 breach imminent. Static hissed back. Copy. Hunters spinning up ETA 15. Contain a viable. Viable shattered when the backpacker, a wiry guy in his 20s, dreads tied back, cupped his ear, grinning. It's calling us, like a show. He stepped off boardwalk, the group trailing, laughter swelling to chorus in their wake. Protocol screamed observe, but my gut, scarred from Faithful's whisper, overrode. I followed, earplugs fumbling for my pack, Rule 6 half-heated. Elena's bark chased. Ethan, backward, don't feed it! Too late. The fisher yawned closer, steam coiling upward in spirals that brushed faces, the air turning clammy, laced with a sweet rot, like overripe fruit fermenting in the heat. The mimics targeted now. The couple's shared laugh from a private joke, twisted mocking. The friends' banter looped endless, pulling them to the edge where the ground hummed inviting. I plugged in, world muffling to thuds in my pulse, but the vibrations carried. Low bubbles from the vent, like lungs chuckling subterranean. The backpacker teetered first, leaning into the drop with a frozen grin. The laughter peeking in his throat as the crust crumbled soft under his boot. The couple linked arms, giggling manically, tipping forward into the black maw below. Fisher swallowing with a wet slurp. Steam hissing up blank where they had been. The friends froze, faces slack with echoed mirth, but I lunged, snagging one's collar, yanking back as the mimic shifted. My voice now, low and bitter from a cell block taunt, years buried. Ethan, join the fun, rebuild in the dark. The pull hit visceral, not physical, but a tug on the marrow, Aogiak flooding. Iron bars closing, judge's gavel laughing, the desperation of break-ins replaying in gleeful reel, the vent's edge blurring to cell floor, cold concrete yawning. The world tilted, Fisher beckoning as my own chuckle bubbled unbidden, plugs biting futile, the rot-sweet air thickening to syrup in my lungs. Memories clawed, the crew's whispers in the night, the crack of glass under gloved hand, the hollow thrill turning to chains, all twisted hilarious, the laughter promising absolution in the drop. I staggered, boot slipping on the center, the remaining friend slipping from my grip into the void, her guffaw cutting short to echo. Rule 4 surged desperate. Count your steps on boardwalks. Odd numbers mean the path's shifted, but twisted for this. Backward count, even to anchor. 20, 18, 16. Retreating nailed to the boardwalk, each step a defiance, the mimic fracturing in my ears. My voice splintering to static, the pull loosening like a knot undone. The fissure receded, steam recoiling, the laughter dulling to burble as hunters crested the ridge. Sealed suits gleaming, probes humming frequencies that sealed the pocket, with a whine like a scream cut short. They fished the voids that dawn. Two bodies, chilled and silent. The backpacker wedged shallow, babbling nonsense till Psyche cleared him. Elena met me at the truck, her nod heavy. Close, Rook. Laughers don't chase, they convince. The hunter led. A gaunt woman with eyes like vent glass, briefed terse. New rule variant. Laughter stops when you forget your name. Deny the echo its anchor. I logged it in the manual, pencil trembling. Mimicry Bloom Norris, personal lure via past audio. Backward count, rule 4. Disrupted, recovery, partial, 2 lost. The yarn looped blacker that night. Migrations linking. Quakes cracking pockets. Laughers rising with the crawlers. The caldera whispering collective. Suingam came slow over Elena's tea. Rules as system now. Not silos. Whistle summons, light feeds, laughter denies self. Break one, the web tightens, pulling you deeper. The park's heart wasn't hidden, it was harmonizing, and we were the off note. Fall crept in with a vengeance that year, the migrations cresting like a wave held too long. Memos flooding the shack's queue with critical drift alerts. Crawlers and laughers veering into the core trails, seismic rumbles sinking with the anomaly's rise. Geologic unrest fueled it. Fault slips under the hotspot, venting pressures that birthed the bleed. Elena and I pulled backcountry sweeps under the full moon's glare, those unlit fringes where the park folded inward. Boardwalks thread in the wild like veins in obsidian. That shift, the orb hung bloated, silvering the meadows to bone. Air crisp, with the bite of impending frost. Crust glowing faint subsurface, as if the magma dreamed awake. We'd cleared the midday stragglers from Fire Hole, a guided group of 20, corporate retreat types in matching fleeces, buzzing with wine box bravado and trail maps that lied. Dusk fell swift, moon rising early, and protocol pinged. Lights off post-sunset, backcountry blackout. But the group lingered, lanterns clicking on like defiant stars, beams stabbing the gloam as they pushed for one more overlook. Elena radioed warning. Tour leads, douse 'em. Rule 3's non-negotiable. Static back. Copy, but they're insistent. Just a quick loop. My patrol overlapped. I vectored in from the ridge, vest heavy with the night's dew, thermos empty, the moon's light turning the path to quicksilver underfoot. The violation snowballed. Beams multiplied, whipping wild as the group joked off the dusk. Lanterns casting jittery shadows that danced wrong on the center. Rule 3 loomed. Flashlights off after dusk in the backcountry. Lights attract the glow eaters. Elena's lore chilled. Voids that fed on luminescence swelling to swallow swaths, leaving null pockets where sound and sight died. The manual warned sparse, photophagic aggregates expand via absorption. Auditory blackout in core. Evade with flare overload. But the group breached collective. 20 beams feeding the night. The air thickening subtle, edges dimming like a lens fogging from within. It answered, not thunder, but hush, a deepening at the tree line, shadows coalescing not from moon but absence. Glow eaters emerged uncoiling. 3 initial ink-black orbs rimmed in stolen gleam. Skins voids absolute, edged with halos flickering pilfered from the lanterns. They drifted low, hugging the boardwalk's underplanks. Tendrils of nothing questing toward the light. The lead eater ballooned first, engulfing a stray beam. The lantern wielder's gasp cutting to null as his world winked. A bubble of void, 10 feet across, swallowing sound, the man's form outlined faint before vanishing mid-scream. Panic rippled, beams flailing wilder, feeding the swarm as more eaters manifested, 5 now swelling to grotesque. Dajen nuot ang sang tuanbo, surfaces rippling like oil on abyss. Tieng nuot ok nuhu vuktam hop kong ki, a wet vacuum that pulled at the edges of hearing, leaving echoes hollow. The group shattered, scattering into the dark, lanterns dropping to scatter glow like chum, eaters surging to gorge. Elena's voice crackled. Ethan! Converge firehole, swarm breach, flares hot. I broke into the chaos, flare kit unslung, but the boardwalk shifted treacherous. Rule 4 haunting as planks warped under odd steps, crust heaving from the quakes below. A woman tripped into a void, her beam the last light swallowed, the eater's rim pulsing triumphant, her form a silhouette erased. I herded the fringes, 6 stragglers clustering frantic, their lights dimity collective as an eater bore down. Massive now, 20 feet void, tendrils brushing my vest with cold that numbed instant. The newt sound booming in my chest like a drain unclogging graves. Twist hit personal. The eater's core. Not blank, but laced with gleams from the lanterns, faces flickering within. The swallowed woman's twisted silent scream. The leads, eyes wide in the halo. And mine? A flash from the cell's bulb, Judge's face leering in the void, pulling with the hunger. Light your way out, convict, it seemed to mock, the newt echoing my gavel's crack. All rules converged desperate. System now, not separate. I killed the nearest lantern, Rule 3 denied. Counted backward even on the shifting plank. Rule 4 anchor. Ears plugged phantom against the mimic laughter remnant, Rule 6 echo. Flare snapped. Red bloom cracking the night. Overload fracturing the eater's rim, shards of stolen light exploding back. The void shrieking silent as it recoiled, core splintering to harmless dark. We bolted the gauntlet, me leading flares arcing to herd the swarm, salt lines hasty across safe planks. The boardwalk's shift yielding to even counts. One more lost. A man veering odd step into the press, his lantern the final feed, eater ballooning apocalyptic before the hunter's probes wind in, frequencies shattering the cores like glass under sonic hammer. Dawn broke the remnants, eaters dissipating to wisps, leaving gouges in the earth like absent bites, the moon paling guilty. 19 accounted, the last, a shadow on the logs. Wildlife panic, the cover story spun. Elena met the evac, her face ashen under the rising light, but her grip on my arm iron. You stripped the boardwalk clean, Ethan, held the weave, rules as one. The hunter crew nodded terse, probes cooling. Swarm quelled, migration spike logged, quakes feeding the bleed. I updated the manual exhaustive. Glow eater ambush fire hole, multi-rule cascade 3,4.6. Flare plus salt, 80% dispersal. Casualty 2. Pizza drop that dawn, her share, no hoard. Steam innocent again. You're not just a convict anymore, she said, mug raised. Ranger weave, kid, the caldera knows it now. Stripes earned in void's bite, but the migrations gnawed deeper. Quakes, linking blooms, anomalies harmonizing, wraiths, crawlers, laughers, eaters rising choral, the heart's rhythm quickening. Swingam settled heavy, rules as armor, but the web tightened with each quake, pulling us all toward the drop. Redemption? Maybe. Or just the next echo. 5 years blurred like steam veiling a mirror. Seasons cycling relentless through the caldera's moods. From the blistering blooms of summer patrols to the iced silences of winter watches, where the vents hummed subterranean hymns. Shifts, stacked like cordwood. Dawn counts on shifting planks. Midnight yarns redrawn after each breach. The manual's pages warping thicker under my pencil's bite. The welts from Faithful faded to faint maps on my skin. The clicks from Lamar echoing fainter in dreams. But the losses tallied. 2 in the voids, a hiker scarred silent. The laughter's echoes that still bubbled unbidden in quiet moments. The preserves a machine ground on, memos multiplying with the migrations. Crawlers veering east, wraiths clustering at the rims, laughers and eaters sinking to the quake's rhythm, as if the hot spot below conducted an unseen orchestra. Yesterday marked the end, or the hinge, depending on how the fog lies. 5 years served, the alternative to bars traded even. I turned in the badge at the outpost desk, its brass dull from thumb-worn handling, dropped the radio into its cradle with a final static sigh, and surrendered the manual. Leather cracked, margins a scrawl of my handiwork, sketches of voids and vents that no geologist would claim. The envelope arrived crisp by mule that morning. Release form stamped neutral, a curt assignment complete in block letters. No commendation or parting words, just the weight lifting or shifting. Hard to tell in the steam. The chopper waited on the helipad, rotors idling like impatient breath, ready to ferry me valleyward, back to the world of concrete grids and unmonitored skies. Elena was there at the cabin's threshold as I shouldered the pack one last time, her frame silhouetted against the rising plumes, thermos in hand, like a scepter she'd never relinquish. We stood wordless at first, the caldera exhaling slow below us, geysers distant as old regrets, the air crisp with autumn's edge biting through the sulfur haze. She stuck out her hand then, grip firm as root rock, calluses rough against my palm, her eyes holding mine with that unflinching scan, saying volumes the voice wouldn't touch. The rules follow you out, kid. Steam doesn't forget a face. I kept the vest, of course. Green wool frayed at the hems, pockets heavy with salt grains and faded yarn scraps she pressed into my fist like talismans. World's full of parks, she said finally, voice gravel soft over the wind. But none like this. Pick one that doesn't whisper back. Her smile cracked faint, the first without the barbs. A nod to the weave we'd spun, the breaches survived. I nodded back, the chopper's thrum vibrating through the gravel, but my feet rooted a beat too long. Yellowstone doesn't let go easy. It's in the bones now. The subtle shift underfoot, the way fog curls like a question unanswered. Hiking the fire road down that final stretch, vest slung loose, the vents hummed farewell. A low burble from a roadside crack, laughter tinged or just wind, hard to parse. The scars itched phantom, cold burns from wraiths, the voids numb from eaters, and the manual's weight echoed in my pack's empty space. Redemption in the wild? That's the cruel jest. It wasn't bars to badge, it was mirrors. Each rule a reflection. We whistle into the dark because We forget to listen. Chase lights in the void because silence accuses. Circle our fears like bison herding the unearthed. The anomalies weren't the monsters. They were us, displaced, rising hungry from cracks. We cracked ourselves. Out here, the rules taught that slow. Not in lectures or logs, but in the pull. The wraiths whisper dredging sins like silt. The crawlers click, measuring your steps against the earth's indifference. The laughers mimicking not voices, but the lies we tell to step off the plank. 5 years, and I emerged not cleansed, but calibrated, counting even in crowds, ears tuned for the off note, lights doused before the hunger stirs. Redemption? Maybe it's not erasure, but endurance. Trading the cell's echo for the calderas. Learning the wild doesn't forgive, but it forges if you weave the breaches tight. The preserves machine churns on without me, Elena's yarns redrawing, rookies fumbling plugs. But the migrations? They're quickening. Hotter vents from the plates grind, quakes sinking blooms into choruses, crawlers schooling now, wraiths lingering past noon, laughers laced with eaters' hush. Something's changing down there. The hotspot flexing not in tantrum but intent, the heart beating louder, pulling threads from the web. If the big one's stirring, the supervolcano's ancient flex, well, that's for the desperate who knock next. My log wraps here, pages splayed like a hand-fanned final, sketches of voids reclaimed, counts that anchored the lost, warnings inked hasty against the bleed. If you're holding this, stumbled across it in some forgotten outpost drawer, washed up from a mule crate, or pieced from whispers in the valley bars, heed the 2 paths. 1, close it gentle, slide it back where the steam won't find it, walk the brochure's lines, chase plumes without the prickle. Tell yourself its quirks and quakes, bison moods and mistricks, America's wonder, tamed and ticketed. Never let the ground's hum touch your souls the same. Chalk the shadows to tricks of the light, the laughs to echoes in the cones. 2, if you're wired like me, screwed the straight path once, pacing regrets in concrete cages, hungering for a detour with bite, then read deep. Study the litany, whistles that summon hands from the vapor, circles that herd the bone from the living, lights that feed the swallowing dark. Cross the faded entries, pencil your own in margins that won't smudge. Add the quake's new cadence, the migration's twist. The preserve's archives are cold type, sterile as a seismic strip. This breathes, the salt's grit on your tongue, the laughter's hook in your throat, the click that measures your worth against the crust. Learn the weave, the rules as one. Deny the echo, count the retreat, starve the hunger. It'll save your skin. Might even save your soul if that's the wager you're placing. Submit if it calls. The anomalies don't log themselves. Your breach, your whisper from the vents, the circle that held too late. The preserve finds the desperate, but the desperate find the truths first. I don't chart the next trail. Could be a diner in some nameless town, coffee without the scorch, windows fog-free, or a radio ping from Elena when the sensors scream choral, pulling me back to the weave. Doesn't matter. If our paths braid in the mist, you'll mark me by the vest, green thread in the fog, scars mapping the rules. Until then, watch the steam for shapes unspoken, count even against the shift, ears sealed to the lure, plug the laughter before it names you, and if the ground chuckles back, run. One last rule uninked till now. If it knows your name in the dark, maybe it's too late. Maybe it's just beginning. That's the measure of Ethan, ex-ranger of the bubbling wild, signing off. But the caldera? It hums eternal.